kind of started when I was a kid. I was raised by my grandparents growing up. My grandfather, he was from the greatest generation, of course. World War II vet, Vietnam, Korea. So he's been around the world. So I remember sitting as a kid, just in admiration at some of the stories he would have, from far off places. And of course, there were war stories, but to a young mind, impressionable, it just kind of incites this sense of longing for what else is out there.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back. I know that you have Wednesday circled, and Wednesday circled is because of me, your host, Andrew Dupy, host of the Leaders Talk podcast. And this week, I am very excited to have with us James Fountain. Now, this CV is going to be absolutely amazing. James is a globally minded visionary leader who believes in the power of business to address today's largest environmental and social imperatives. With more than 2 decades of experience in sustainability, ESG, and strategic consulting, he has become a beacon for organizations seeking cross-business leadership in this crucial endeavor. He inspires tangible growth while advocating for environmental justice, sustainability, and social equity. And this is really interesting, ladies and gentlemen. James has held influential positions, including roles with the Big Four, and he has a tenure with the National Geographic Society and the United Nations. James, in those roles, is also a member of the Explorers Club and a fellow of the Royal Geographical Society. James, wow. Well, I feel kind of out of my element with that. That's amazing stuff. So tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, well, Andrew, first of all, thank you for inviting me to the show. It's a pleasure and an honor to be
Oh,
here.
absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. So it's been a journey, for sure. As you kind of just articulated,
Well, Geographical Society, I think you're well equipped for journeys.
Yeah, well, it all really kind of started when I was a kid. I was raised by my grandparents growing up. My grandfather, he was from the greatest generation, of course. World War II vet, Vietnam, Korea. So he's been around the world. So I remember sitting as a kid, just in admiration at some of the stories he would have, from far off places. And of course, there were war stories, but to a young mind, impressionable, it just kind of incites this sense of longing for what else is out there. Growing up in a small town in Ohio, you very much want to see what the rest of the world's about. So that's kind of where it all started. And then I spent some time guiding mountaineering out in the western United States. Through up and down the Rockies, the Cascades. And that eventually I went to college. I didn't start school till I was my early 20s. And then found geography. Geography just felt like a natural fit to me. I had a very influential professor at a community college in Dayton, Ohio, and he kind of incited that in me. So since then it just kind of took off. So I got an internship at National Geographic Society that turned into a small mapping gig. Then with the grad school, when I went to grad school, I focused on cultural geography, at the University of Montana. And that led to a role with the United Nations. And I was stationed in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, for a while. So I was doing work out there, working mostly in some GIS work, with some contingencies from Uruguay, mapping some of the destroyed infrastructure, from the warring factions out there. And just again, this one thing kind of led to another. And I came back because of the work I did. The earlier work I did for my graduate work. I did research in Pakistan, Nepal, Pakistan, most of the Hindu Kush, Karakoram, Himalaya region. And I studied a phenomenon called glacial lake outburst flooding. And it's basically, long and short, is just, with global warming and climate change happening, our glaciers are melting faster than they have in the past, and they're creating these supra and intraglacial lakes in the mountains. And when one of the ice blocks break, it sends a bunch of water down the valley and floods out communities. Accenture about me, I had some experience in glacial lake outburst flooding, and they needed somebody who knew a little bit about that to work out in Seattle, and just kind of all went from there. So, and then here I am, BDO now, as one of the leaders in their sustainability and ESG groups.
So tell us a little bit about the concept of global sustainability. Maybe for some in our audience that just haven't really, they may have heard the name, they haven't really looked into it very much. Kind of break it down for us what that term means and what that means for your business and the world.
Sure. Yeah. Sustainability. Most organizations go by the definition the United Nations has put together, and the United Nations has developed some sustainable development goals around these initiatives. But really, just in its most simple term, it's it's not using any more resources than what we can replace,
Right.
for longevity, so that's the gist of it, and it's through the last several decades, especially since the Industrial Revolution, we as humans, have been not doing that. We have been extracting more resources than we can replace. And then carbon is another situation too, where with climate change and global warming, we found ourselves in a situation now to where the Earth is heating at a rate that is not sustainable for human life.
Right.
So that's the most of the buzz you hear around sustainability right now is really centered around those two concepts, around mostly biodiversity loss and climate change.
And I mean that's definitely something that affects absolutely everybody. And just the fact that a lot of people don't really understand what those two things have together, the idea of resources and the fact that we are in a massive loss of our global biodiversity. How important is it to educate people to understand better what these kind of terms mean to all of us?
Oh, it's critical. It's critical. I mean, Andrew, as much as I'd love to say, that I'm gonna go forth and I'm gonna save the world, for myself.
Yeah.
And I can't do it. You can't do it. Your organization can't do it. My organization can't do it. It takes the collective. We're in a situation, a lot, sustainability has has a main paradigm called systems thinking. It's exactly what you think. It's kind of figuring out how all the systems of all the parts of the system fit together. What happens when you remove one of those, when you add one of those, how that changes things. But another part of that is interconnectedness, and interdependence. So we are all interconnected. What impacts you impacts me ultimately. The work that my actions have an impact upon you as well. So as globally, as we're long and short, sorry to ramble on this part, but
oh no, go ahead.
Yeah, but we have to act together is really what I'm getting at. Since we are all interconnected, we have to understand that what we do impacts each other, and that goes everybody from New York to the most remote area in Bhutan, everywhere in between.
And I think that that's really important to understand, that we are all in it together. One of the things that differentiates us, when you go back and look at evolutionarily the common ancestor and why did humans win over things like other like the gorilla and the ape that were much or the chimpanzee, which were much stronger. It was the idea that when the predator came into our cave, our society, we fought them together. We didn't leave anyone behind. It was we got the sticks, we got the rocks, we dealt with it. That was a microcosm of what humans began to do to build their society, then to build civilization and to build walls and to do all that. We've lost a little bit of that, haven't we? We've kind of thought ourselves. Outthunk doesn't sound like a very good term, but we've outthought ourselves a little bit, haven't we? In how we're viewing our responsibilities to each other in many ways.
Yeah, I think that's true, and in a lot of ways. I mean, humans are social animals. We do depend upon each other. And we could probably spend a whole entire podcast episode exploring the pathos and the ethos. So
yeah,
how that works and why that works. But yeah, I mean, I think you're right. I mean, I think technology. I mean, as good as technology is, everything has a add, everything has a subtract. Everything is in balance, right? So as good as technology has been for us, there have been some downsides. I think technology has kind of helped enable that separation, I think, that you're describing a little bit. And again, we could go on to that for a long time, but
no, absolutely. But that kind of leads me to the educational part of everything. How do you stand out when you look at there are a lot of voices that are trying to bring more attention to this kind of subject and basically trying to save the world, as you had said it, through education. So what are ways in which you have been able to take your message and reach larger audiences?
Well, this is one of them, and yeah, right. And in publications, and part of that too. Again, it's I speak at some universities, University of Montana. I guess speak there from time to time. But writing, writing is really where I'm going at right now. And I'm currently in the middle of a four book series on sustainability, breaking it down different parts. And I recently published, hope to be publishing soon, a chapter in a book by Leaders Press on persuasive leadership and sustainability. That I'd love to get into a little bit too. But it's really just it's really championing, taking every opportunity you have to champion the message of sustainability. Again, it's so easy to just get back, if you're a skeptic, and say, "Oh, James is just another one of those tree hugging hippies. Just let him go out there and rant." But no, it's an imperative. It really is an imperative. It's not just an ethos anymore. We're past that. It's in the business sphere now. It's in our daily lives. I mean, we see it. I mean, no matter where you are, you've seen climate change. It's happening. So just taking every chance I have to talk about it. One of the areas that I think that one of the approaches that I like to explore more, I think, than others is really about trying to find more of a holistic approach to climate change. So through some of my travels, another effort that I'm doing right now, I'm traveling all around the world to some of our most remote communities and I'm working with some indigenous folks and learning from them. Trying to see how climate change has impacted their lives. Climate change, biodiversity loss, global development, and learning from them. And what I've learned is there's so much value in indigenous knowledge and indigenous wisdom that we often don't look at as solutions to the climate change. So bringing the indigenous voice into the collective approach toward climate mitigation strategy, I think is going to be critical going forward, because these communities have been stewards of the earth for eons. They already know how to do it. They've been doing it. It's just they've got a lot to add that we don't always kind of listen to.
So, I'm glad that you mentioned the Leaders Press anthology that we're putting together. And yeah, that was why we found you. I mean, we literally were looking for people that had interesting, good ideas that we're trying to persuade. That's the whole concept of persuasive leadership is, how do you persuade someone, especially when there's a topic that, I mean, you shouldn't see pushback on this kind of topic, but there is a lot of pushback out there. So why did you choose to, when we reached out to you, to go forward with the small form, the anthology, rather than continuing to do your work and maybe build for way down the line a bigger book?
Yeah, well, great question. I mean, but it's really the topic of the book, persuasion. I mean, persuasion in leadership, generally speaking, I think is so important. I mean, it's one of those arts that it's one of the soft arts we don't really think about a lot, that we need, but it's really critical to be a successful leader, especially in sustainability. And it's especially in the climate to where, the immediate return isn't always apparent. You have a lot of skeptics, in sustainability who don't really understand the value. I mean, like a typical skeptical response to sustainability, it questions the need, feasibility, and return on investment of sustainable practices. To these skeptics, sustainability might seem like an inconvenient, costly detour. It's sustainability oftentimes, at least up until very recently anyway, is seen more as a cost center rather than a profit driver. I think we need to reframe this narrative, and reframing that narrative in a positive light, one that is more profitable toward business, is going to require, at least for the short term, it's going to require fairly well-developed persuasive skills,
Yeah.
And this anthology was an opportunity for me to kind of get that message out. So saying like, look, as sustainability leaders, as leaders, even who are not in sustainability, who are bringing sustainability into their practice, we need to know about persuasion. We need to know how to persuade leaders in our organizations and those who report to us on why sustainability is important, and how to build a more sustainable enterprise.
That leads me to the thought here. This isn't a subject, or really a subject that we can take time on. It's not really something that we can say, oh well, maybe I'll put that my book that's going to actually maybe change some minds, convince some people, open some eyes 10 years down the line. Let me just take some time and work at it. 10 years down the line, we're going to be in a much worse situation now than we are now. if we continue down the paths that we're continuing down.
Absolutely. Yeah, no doubt about it. It's, that's the thing about, this current environment too. Oftentimes sustainability, in ESG, environmental, social, and governance, that's another area I work in. It's really kind of they're very well related. They're very much related. But ESG, environmental, social, and governance, or corporate governance, it's really it's where it's like the reporting side of sustainability in a sense. I'm grossly oversimplifying it, but that's the gist of it. But they're really closely tied to risk management and systems thinking. I mentioned systems thinking earlier. About bringing in a component to a system, taking something out, and understanding how that impacts the entire system. Amid challenging economic conditions, some companies relegate ESG risks and instead prioritize what they see as business as usual. These business critical issues. It's a false trade-off. ESG risk is a critical issue. And that's the message we're trying to get out. ESG and sustainability, they are very critical issues right now, and they're a significant source of both threats to business continuity and opportunities for value creation. And that's a message that is, I think, starting to permeate, through the business sphere. It's starting to catch on, but that's really the message we're trying to portray. Because in the end, an organization is a system, and the health of that system relies on prudent and consistent monitoring, measuring, and mitigation of environmental, social, and government risks in any market condition, not just the bottom line, not just shareholder value. Those ultimately lead to shareholder value.
So, as someone that has actually, worked with the United Nations, I'm sure you've got some interesting ideas about how you persuade people. Because my degrees are in history and English, so I've studied the formation of like the League of Nations, the United Nations. A lot of times it's like herding cats when you're trying to actually get those bodies to agree on something. So what are some tricks that you have, just as someone who's a global leader, in how that you can make persuasive arguments that may persuade people that have even other issues that are holding them back from embracing these kind of ideas?
Yeah, it's I can tell you what's worked for me. I think most sustainable leaders and their they have their own tactics, but what's worked for me is it's one, it's recognizing someone coming from sustainability into the business sphere. It's recognizing that paradigms at executive leadership are not always aligned with what has historically and traditionally been deemed as sustainability. So it's really kind of coming in with that open mindset, the beginner's mind, one might say, and trying to connect the dots, trying to bring your past into sustainability, knowing what needs to happen for the environment, and for business, because that's, again, without business, none of this happens. Right. Period. Without the money to fund the initiatives, technology doesn't happen. Without the technology, we're right where we stay right where we are. So business is critical to that. And so it's really coming in with that authenticity, being as authentic as you possibly can, and not being afraid to show your passion. People in sustainability, I think we're the stigma is that we're an overly passionate group, and I think that becomes, and it's justified, and I throw myself into that camp too. I get my colleagues, kind of jab me every here and there for being so passionate as it is, but it's something it's so important to what we're doing, and if you can sincerely convey, your passion, the realities that we have, or that our planet is facing, and also the business value. Again, I gotta keep driving back to that point, the business value of sustainability in ESG consulting can bring to an organization. Just knowing the value of those and speaking the opportunities, it's changing the narratives. It's not coming in with doom and gloom, saying, "Oh, we're all going to die in a fiery hell." If you don't change your way, finding a way to say the same thing, but in a way that's a little bit more uplifting and more encouraging people to act. So
yeah, because you're absolutely right, and that's we need to be looking at the benefits that we'll have. Right. It goes back to the fighting against the predator in the cave. The benefit is that predator doesn't come and take one of our children off and has dinner with them or on them. But in this situation, it's not just the fear of it, it's also, what then builds from that kind of communal society. It isn't just fighting off the predators, saving your individual life or saving the life of someone you care about. It's also then, well, now we understand how to work together. Now that we work together, we can begin to build things together. So it's a little bit better to say what the benefits are than to just, well, and I don't want to make Greta Thunberg sound terrible, but just sit in front of someone and just say, how dare you? That doesn't always really make a lot of headway, does it?
Well, I mean, again, and this is one more reason, that I wanted to be part of the anthology, because again, it's about telling the story, and storytelling is critical. It's I'm gonna butcher a quote for you. I can say,
okay, go for it.
Like the Hotel Rwanda, it's a really good movie. You haven't seen it. It's Don Cheadle from.
Oh yeah, fantastic film. Yeah.
Yeah, but anyway, long and short, it's like it's about the atrocities that happened in Rwanda and Burundi. So it's a massacre that happened, and there's a guy on camera filming all these atrocities, and the protagonist at one point says, so I'm so glad you're filming all this. Now the whole world can see this, and the world will act. Well, another character says, I think the world will say it, and they'll say, isn't that sad, and go right back to eating dinner, because it's not relatable. I think part of the story we have to tell, we have to make it relatable to people. If they don't understand how it impacts, themselves and their loved ones, their community, if they don't get the gravity of it, I mean, you can, to your point, you can sit there and pound someone in the head, and you shall recycle. You need to be involved in circular economy. You should stop driving your car when you can walk. I mean, that's not going to really impact anybody. You got to make it relatable, make people understand why it's important. Answer the why for them. Again, that goes back to the persuasion. You have to show them, and it's not persuasion to be manipulative. It's persuading to incite action for good.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree completely. So I'm going to shift gears a little bit here as we kind of start to head towards the winding down portion. Ladies and gentlemen, before we were talking here, James let me in that this was the first one of the podcast that he's been on, kind of a big. He said he was a little bit nervous. He's doing fantastically, by the way. And I know that you're heading into writing and beginning to talk about getting an anthology and maybe potentially writing long form books in the future. How did you overcome the blocks, the obstacles in your mind to perhaps doing those? Maybe the stage fright, maybe the fright of writing something that people aren't going to like, because I think that's something that holds back people that have big messages, that they just feel like, well, I don't know if I'm the person to say these kind of things.
Totally. That's for me. That's the complete hardest part. It's imposter syndrome. I think it's I've heard it before. And that's forever. I was like, okay, but this is something this is a story I want to tell. This is something that I really want to get out there. But am I the right person? I mean, it's like, am I qualified to write this? Especially one of my deep interests is in indigenous knowledge and disinfliction. I'm a white guy from Ohio. I'm born and raised in Ohio, live in Montana. Why am I the right guy to talk about that? And finally, I realized, a lot of it is allyship. It's like I can be, and there's a line, I can cross the line, but a lot of it is using whatever platform you have, big or small, to speak for good. So, and once I finally came to that conclusion, once I finally came to like, yeah, why not me? It was a process, and it happened through speaking with mentors, speaking with coaches, close friends, long runs, for just self-contemplation and reflection. Eventually, just through my community, I was encouraged. Like, yeah, James, you are the right person. You can do this. Go for it. Write it. And I started.
Yeah, and I think there's also one of the things that I like to think about is like, imagine what'll happen if you don't do it. Now think about the situation. What you can think of all the bad things that might happen to you if you do, but what if you don't? What if you just say, my message isn't going to be as important as somebody else's that may have more press, may have a bigger footprint. So I'm just going to keep this to myself and keep it in my own lane. I think that there's something that people miss about, not imagining the scenario in which maybe you have something that's going to actually benefit someone. Why would you keep that to yourself?
Yeah, spot on. And as you kind of articulated in my bio at the beginning, I'm might be a little prone to suffering from a little bit of FOMO. So that is what an insider for me too. But and that's the other part that was so challenging for me too. Because I had always been approaching it as like, I have to have the message. I have to have the it has to change, do all this big change. And another conclusion I came to, it's like, no, you don't. You don't have to answer all the problems. You have to make an impact. If you impact one person and you incite that one person to change, to ways, or to write something that can inspire a lot of people to change, that's worth it. If you have that small message, that insight that opens up a perspective to someone, it's like, oh yeah, I never thought about that. It changes the way of being that can kind of snowball into helping others. That's worth it. So it doesn't have to be big. Small steps count.
Yeah, absolutely. And I usually ask kind of in the end for a golden nugget, something that's very applicable, but I think you kind of hit it there, but I'll still give you the floor just here as we're wrapping up. What would you like to leave with our audience? Just a thought for them to have that maybe helps them understand a little bit better about, your philosophy of persuasion and how this works with, especially the topic that you're talking on.
Yeah, especially amongst the business leaders, listening to this podcast. Just really understand that, adopting a sustainability strategy or an ESG strategy does not have to be a cost to your organization. There are a lot of studies out there. There's a lot of research out there that shows how profitable it can be for your organization. And know that by doing this, not only are you keeping your stakeholders and your shareholders happy, because you're innovating, and we're learning more and more about what is material to an organization's business growth. Hence, it's not just the bottom line. As we learn more and more about that, there's a lot of value to adopting this, from innovation to efficiency improvement to long-term value creation. I'd be happy to talk with anybody about it in more detail.
And to that end, James, I know we got your chapter in our anthology, Persuasive Leadership, that's coming up very soon. But what are some other ways in which our audience can find you?
Sure. Of course, I'm on LinkedIn, but james-fountain.com is one. So James-Fountain is not one. And those are probably the two best ones. I do have a link, a LAQ profile as well, but they'll lead you to the website and to LinkedIn anyway.
Fantastic. And ladies and gentlemen, that link will be down below so that you won't have to enter those dashes manually. So just go ahead and click through, look a little bit more into James. James, I always say this, but it's especially true today. We could go on and on about this, especially it's a topic that's near and dear to my heart as I'm being invaded by fire ants, as we discussed before. Yet another ecological disaster brought about through sometimes our inability to think about sustainability. But it was a real pleasure to speak to you. It was a joy, and we really wish you the best and for all of our benefits, success in your endeavors.
Andrew, it was an honor, and thank you very much for the opportunity.